The weekly Industry Angel podcast hears from business leaders and entrepreneurs who share their stories and that all-important light bulb moment. This can inspire us all and maybe scratch that itch and kickstart that idea that keeps you awake at night. Welcome to episode 21 of the Industry Angel. So you know how I like this show to be diverse, and I always say that we learn and pick up things from places and people you'd not normally seek out. Well, this episode is one of those times. Today's guest's been in the diary for a long time. He's a great guy, and I'm really looking forward to this one. Today we have the king of wordplay, slam poet, author, maths whiz, Harry Baker. Hi, Harry.
Hello, good to be here.
Hi, good stuff. Harry, you are my all-time favourite TEDx speaker.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Thanks for your time.
You're very welcome.
That's how selfish I am on this podcast. I bring in people who I love, okay? So, Harry, you've been travelling quite a bit, yeah? This last sort of month or two, is that right?
I have, yes. So this year actually, I was in Australia and New Zealand, amongst other places at the start of the year. And so I kind of got back, about a month ago. I've been doing shows around the UK.
And what were you doing over there?
So I was doing a mixture of stuff, mainly kind of poetry shows and promoting. I was in Edinburgh last year doing a show called The Sunshine Kid, which is based on poems out of my first collection from my book. So it was amazing because I'd never been before, but partly through the TEDx talk, through other stuff online, there was enough momentum that people out there knew stuff. But then while I was there, I did a few things in some international schools as well. So that was really fun. But yeah, it's nice to be back in the UK, doing shows here, writing new stuff.
Cool. International schools, did you say there?
Yeah, so I was in Beijing and Bangkok for 3 weeks, and I wasn't sure how that was going to be.
I was going to say, so you performed your poems to the kids in Bangkok, in Beijing?
Yeah.
Wow, and how'd that go down?
It was fantastic. I mean, some of these schools are so impressive. But like the fact that they've got time and space to bring poets in and the kids seem genuinely enthusiastic about it is amazing. So I mean, that's partly performing, partly doing workshops and getting the kids to write and perform their own stuff. But it was just a really positive and open space for it.
Brilliant. And you obviously did a little bit of traveling as well and kicked back.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way to see the world.
For sure, yeah. Well, that's brilliant. I'm dying for you to give us a couple of poems, but maybe if you wouldn't mind, before you do that, just give us a little bit of background, Harry. Where did this start from? How did you get into this?
Absolutely. So I'm currently a full-time poet. I graduated last year. I studied in Bristol and studied maths with a year abroad. So I lived in Germany for a year, but the main thing I studied was maths. And that just came out of a place of when I was in school. I quite liked maths and science, and my school had a lot of music opportunities. So I used to rap in a band, and I rapped about maths once, and then got asked to go to a poetry night, which was themed around prime numbers. So it was a very specific niche beginning, but I really enjoyed kind of bringing those two worlds together. So I mean, I'd love to do my prime number maths poem for you.
I love that. Do you know, I've played that TEDx talk you did. You did prime numbers at TEDx talk, didn't you? Yeah, you did. I played that to my boy a couple of times, and he just looks at me. He's like, "Why do you like this, Dad?" I'm like, "Just listen." I mean, he was only 10 at the time. I'm like, "Just listen to the thing." It goes over his head a little bit.
Yeah.
So where do you think that's best well received? What sort of age group?
So it's really interesting doing stuff in schools because even before, between different year groups, there's definite things that people like more than others. I mean, I've got one poem called Dinosaur Love that I feel like is my most child-friendly just because it's got some dinosaur noises in it. And then other ones, I mean, like what I like about the prime number poem, I mean, I'll do it before I talk about it completely. It's got the kind of storytelling aspect of it too. So you don't have to be a super maths nerd to be able to listen to it. It just, might have one or two niche references that are quite fun if you do get them.
It's a bit like watching sort of that George Orwell Animal Farm, where you either take it on its face value or you can look at the higher level.
Yeah, exactly. And like even stuff like Pixar films I love watching because there's, all these kind of in-jokes in there. I just finished reading a book by a guy called Simon Singh, which is something like the mathematical secrets of The Simpsons. And there's so much
No
like
way.
in-depth analysis and like screenshots of private jokes that they've put in. But it talks about how a lot of the writers are, mathematicians or graduates, and it's just this really like amazing thing of basically trying to like sneak math into people's lives when they don't really want you to. But yeah, I'll do the poem, and then I can talk about it a bit more maybe.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this poem is called 59, and as I said, it's a love poem about prime numbers. 59 wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, realizes all his hair is on one side of his head, takes just under a minute to work out that it's because of the way that he slept he finds some clothes and gets dressed. Now he can help but look in the mirror and be subtly impressed how he looks rough around the edges and yet casually messed, and as he glances out the window sees the sun that he is blessed with of 60 from across the street. Now 60 was beautiful, perfectly trimmed cuticles, dressed in something suitable, never rude or crude at all, unimprovable, right on time as usual, more on cue than a snooker ball, but liked to play it super cool. And 59 wanted to tell her that he knew her favourite flower. He thought of her every second, every minute, every hour, but he knew it would not work. He would never get the girl because although she lived across the street, they came from different worlds. 59 amid 60's perfectly round figure. 60 thought 59 was odd. You see, one of his favourite films was 101 Dalmatians. She, of course, preferred the sequel. He romanticized the idea they were star-crossed lovers. They could overcome the odds and evens because they had each other, but she maintained the strict reason imposed on her by her mother that separate could not be equal. And though at the time he felt stupid and dumb for trying to love a girl controlled by her stupid mum, he should have been comforted by that simple son to 59 away from 60, and you're left with the one. And sure enough, after 2 months of moping around, 61 days later, 61 was who he found. He had lost his keys and his parents were out, so one day after school he went to a house, and as he noticed the slightly wonky numbers on the door, he wondered why he never introduced himself before. She let him in, his jaw dropped in awe. 61 was like 60, with a little bit more. Now she had prettier eyes and an approachable smile. And like him, rough around the edges, casual style. And like him, everything was disorganized piles. And like him, how a minute my friend stayed a while. She was like him. And he liked her. He reckoned she would like him as she knew he was like her. And it was different this time. I mean, this girl was wicked. So he plucked up the courage and asked for her digit. She said, I'm 61. He grinned, said, I'm 59. And today I've had a really nice time. So tomorrow, if you wanted, you could come over to mine. She said, sure. She loved talking to someone just as quirky. So she agreed to this unofficial first date. In the end, he was only ready 1 minute early, but it did not matter because she arrived 1 minute late. And from that moment on, there was non-stop chatter. How they loved X Factor. How they had two factors. How that did not matter. Distinctiveness made them better. And by the end of the night, they knew that they went together. And one day, she was talking about stuck up 60. She noticed that 59 looked a bit shifty. He blushed and told her of his crush, the best thing that never happened because it led to us. And 61 was clever, see, not prone to jealousy. She looked him in the eyes and told him quite tenderly, you're 59, I'm 61, together we combine to become twice what 60 could ever be. And at this point, 59 had tears in his eyes. We're so glad to have this one-of-a-kind girl in his life. He told her the very definition of being prime was the only one in himself could his heart divide, and she was the one he wanted to give his heart to. She said she felt the same, and now she knew the films were half true because that was not real love. That love was just a sample. When it came to real love, they were a prime example.
Cool, loving that, loving that. So come on, tell me all about it. Where'd this come from?
So yeah, I mean, it was surreal. I was asked to go to. It was a regular poetry night in London called Utter that had a different theme every month. And so it's really good for encouraging writers to come up with new material. And on this one night, the theme was prime numbers. So there are 25 poets writing poems about different prime numbers. And like a lot of them felt like people had looked up the Wikipedia page for their number and made some mathematical facts rhyme. But
Right, okay.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to bring in the more storytelling side of it. And as soon as I saw the number 59, I thought it's next to 60. 60 divides really nicely. I wanted to go for that more personal kind of side of it. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having, a couple of those kind of one-liner math jokes in there, and then weaving it together in this kind of quite sweet story. But that was one of the first things I wrote that I would call a poem, I guess. Before that, I'd done a lot of stuff to music, and I always loved playing with language and rhyming and rhythm and trying to make stuff sound cool. But that was whilst four of my friends were playing guitar as loudly as they could, and so doing it in a poetry context where people were listening to every word suddenly felt like a completely different space. And so it's kind of off the back of that I started to go to more events. Realized the majority of them weren't math themed, and
I was going to say you were really jammy when he did that. I don't know. They said it was maths. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And just seeing the broad range of things people could talk about and the way they would do it and the power that just words by themselves had. Some poets would just be not too far off a stand-up comedy set, to be honest. And
Sure.
others, would be super serious and make your skin tingle. And it was all just words by themselves doing this, and it was a space where you could be heard, and I absolutely loved it. So I kind of began writing and performing more. And yeah, this was as I was kind of coming to the end of secondary school, thinking about going to uni. So I still went and studied maths, but that was already with the aim that I would try and do as much poetry stuff on the side as I could. And so when I graduated last year, there was enough momentum, partly through my TEDx talk being shared on the main TED.com website, partly through having my book out in my final year. I kind of knew there was enough momentum to at least try and do it full time. And so far, it's been fantastic. I kind of realized that whatever I ended up doing, I would still write stuff on the side because I've always loved it. But to be able to dedicate all my time to it has just meant I've been able to say yes to more opportunities and kind of see where it goes.
So you mentioned there about your book, The Sunshine Kid. So you did that whilst you were still studying.
Yes. So that book, um, I mean, it's kind of a collection of all my favorite things I've written so far. So the actual poems in it range over around 4 or 5 years. So starting off with this maths rap and 59, going through to kind of just leaving uni. Um, and the stuff I write, the aim is for it to be performed. So I was quite hesitant about putting it down
Sure.
in written form. Um, but it was partly speaking to other poets I knew who had done that and gone through that process. And also just, I was getting to the point where, I had 20 plus poems, and I was starting to not perform some of the older ones and didn't want to lose them. And also people after gigs were saying kind of, I really liked your stuff. I'd love to go through it at my own pace because you talk too fast and things like that. And so actually coming around to the idea, but the main thing that meant I was willing to kind of go for it. One was there's an independent publisher called Burning Eye who are based in the southwest of England, who are fantastic and do stuff with performance poets and give you a lot of freedom to kind of make it look, in a way that you're comfortable and also, help you promote it. But also my brother is a graphic designer. So he did
Brilliant.
all of the typesetting and the illustrations. And so actually, because I don't know, like writing a poem, it's something you end up being quite precious about. You put all of this work into crafting it the way you want. And so it was good that I could work with my brother because I kind of trust him enough to know me and know the poems. And so setting them out and trying to maintain enough of my voice in it, even though it's on paper, was a really interesting process. But I mean, with the TED videos, with the book, suddenly it was a case of not knowing quite how far it was reaching. Because when I first started, I was doing open mics, and if there were 50 people in the room, you have that connection with them, and then one of them might run another night somewhere, and so through word of mouth, you kind of get to grow in a very organic way, and then you write more poems, go to more events. But yeah, it was like it took a life on of itself when people would order books from countries I'd never been to, or get comments from people watching the TED Talks, which is amazing, kind of seeing with the internet and everything now, how easy it is to have a more international spread.
Sure. You mentioned there about talking too fast, or are you someone who talk? when you're talking internationally, do people kind of really have to listen in, or?
Yeah, and I've learned to slow down in certain places. So I lived in Germany for a year, and that was a fantastic experience because there's a really healthy poetry and spoken word scene there. But also there's quite a decent grasp of English. But I learned that certain poems work better than others. So actually,
Sure.
the prime numbers one, because there's quite a lot of nuance of language there. So just things like the simple double meanings of, a number being odd and a person being odd, or
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It fits with the story quite a lot. Whereas other poems I've got where it's about a kind of slightly simpler theme, even if you don't get every line or every double meaning, you can still follow on the story a bit easier.
Yeah. Sure.
So it was a really good process working out what works in different places and what doesn't. I mean, I even found that the first time I went to America, I thought, we speak the same language, it would be easy. And then realizing, one, that I had an accent that people found it hard to understand. Two, I was referencing things from my childhood or local things that just made no sense out there. And so, it makes you kind of look at your own stuff in a different way. And similarly, seeing the local poets there and not understanding all of the references.
Sure. So do you ever edit your poems? I mean, like literally months, years later, do you go back?
I do have a couple of lines I've changed since, partly with some older poems, just because it made them feel slightly dated. But also that was the other thing, putting it in book form, it suddenly felt very permanent. And I was,
Yeah, definitely.
especially because certain poems I've got, during the performance, there'll be a line or two where I'll kind of naturally ad lib something. And then it felt weird putting that in book form in the poem. And so it was,
Right.
it's kind of like the refined studio version rather than the live album version of something. And so it's trying to work out on paper how to present it in the cleanest way. But yeah, I never thought I'd have to worry about punctuation when, speaking my poems. So there's a whole different process.
Well, I guess you've took it a step further, but maybe this is going back to your roots a bit, but you're adding music in there now, yeah?
Yes, and that's been really, really fun. So when I started doing the solo poetry, I really enjoyed the freedom that came from not having to stick to a kind of metronome or a beat and just letting the words breathe a little bit. And also, if you tell a joke or a funny part, people are allowed to laugh and it doesn't completely throw you off. So I stepped away from the music stuff for a while. I would still, because also whenever there was a beat, it was suddenly a temptation to turn into the same 16-year-old rapper that I'd been.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I couldn't have the same natural kind of flow with it. But I've got a friend called Chris Reed who I went to school with, and we used to do gigs together where it was mostly covers. And basically, if there was any like pop song with a rap verse, that was perfect for us. So things like American Boy, he would be Estelle, I would be Kanye West. It was the perfect
Right, okay.
duo. But then more recently, we've written some stuff together, and that's been really fun because he does a lot of kind of jazz and soul stuff. Musically, it's incredible, but also, I guess similarly working with my brother, the big thing for me is that he knows me very well, and so when I'm putting the words to the music, it's not all, two-step on the beat, definite kind of stuff. It's him building the music around my stuff. So I mean, it's still, in time and fits, but it's been really fun exploring with it that way. So we're going up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year, doing a show, which again isn't a normal route for a musical kind of outfit, I guess. But I just, similarly with the poems, for me, writing these tunes is about the live aspect of it and the performance side of it. And there's some really fun kind of parts to them where the audience get involved. I mean, I was very hesitant to call it musical comedy because I think that brings up all kind of other ideas. So we're still in the spoken word section of the program. But I've really loved writing stuff to music again with a kind of verse chorus structure. I think partly it's just really put the emphasis back on having fun with it and not feeling too pressured. And I mean, I have fun with the poems and I love writing them, but I feel like it's got to end in the right way, and it's got to have the right kind of arc to it, and it needs to be perfect. And not that the music stuff is throwaway and it's trash, but it's very fun, and there's a different purpose to it. And so I've really enjoyed doing that with him, and also just means, doing gigs together, we can have a bit of a laugh on stage, and there's a different kind of energy there. So yeah, at the moment we're working on a EP album that we're taking up to Edinburgh. So as well as Harry Baker stuff and doing Harry and Chris stuff.
So are you gonna practice that before you do it in Edinburgh?
Yeah. So next week. Well, I don't know when this will go out, but next week in London we're doing a kind of live album recording session, and we've got a couple of kind of smaller festival gigs and a couple of bits around, which is really cool. Because what I found doing my solo Edinburgh show is, as confident as I am in the individual poems, and as much as I love doing them individually, to build them into a kind of set or a show, which is often what I do now, I really like giving them a bit of context and doing the introduction. So in the TEDx talk, I really liked that I was given the space to do a couple of poems and introduce them as well, because they work as standalone things, but I think given a bit of narrative and context of who I am and what I'm doing, it kind of helps as well. And that doesn't mean doing a stand-up routine in between each piece, but I think having that personal element, because also I think listening to a poem is a slightly more intense kind of listening as opposed to having a conversation. So I quite like giving people a chance to breathe in between and then going into the next one.
Yeah, I mean, you did that with your TEDx talk, even the way you introduced yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I know that people have their different ideas of what poetry is, of what performance poetry or slam poetry or spoken word poetry. There's so many names people try and give it to understand it better. In reality, a lot of performers are very different, and there's things people have in common, but all I need is for people to be willing to listen, and then I feel like I can do myself justice and they can make up their own minds. So I feel like if you're given slightly longer to do that, I mean, I used to do these poetry slams where you have a 3-minute time limit, so there's no time to even give your poem a title. You just go in, do it, and leave.
Were you the youngest ever poetry slam champion? Or?
So yeah, I was,
very modest. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that was fantastic, and that was the kind of international competition again, seeing poetry done in different languages and seeing people try and judge it. I love poetry slams, and I love the competitions that can take place because it exists. And I'm glad I did it so young, because it was kind of a baptism of fire in a way, and getting to do stuff. And now I can kind of sit back a bit, take my time with the poems, do a bit of introduction, and kind of present it in a slightly more relaxed way, I guess. But yeah, I really love the intensity of slams, especially when I was first getting started, because there's just that extra element to it. And I know some people don't like that at all, and they don't do slams because they don't want to perform something they really care about and have a random audience member say that it's worth 6 out of 10. And I completely understand that. And I also know people who I think place too much weight on the slams and on the idea of winning. And that's why I'm kind of always a bit tongue-in-cheek about being the world champion, because it's down to the 5 people in the audience that day who had the scorecards.
Right.
And I did well to get there. I very much gave it my all, and I put myself in the position to be able to win. So I'm not saying that I'm not, the best poet in the world. By all means, I am. But it could have gone
well recovered.
It could have gone very differently.
So what's your favorite poem then that you've done? Obviously,
my favorite one that I've done. Well, it would make sense now to do one of the ones I did at the slam. I've got one called Paper People, which, whilst other poems I kind of put in and take out of my sets, this one is probably one I've done the most, just because I feel like it encapsulates a lot of what I try and do with my poetry. It's quite playful at points, and it's unnecessarily complicated at points, but it's got a kind of heart to it as well. So yeah, I'd love to do that if you're.
Brilliant. Do you want a glass of water first, though? There's lots of peas in this one, isn't
I
there?
might do that if you don't mind. But yeah, so I did this and again, the World Cup was in Paris. So I'm sure, the judges had a fairly decent grasp of French, of course, and also English, and they did have subtitles. But I think part of why this did so well was it's got the performance element too. And I'm sure they didn't understand every single, word and line, but
Yeah.
something else. I'm genuinely going to have some more to know.
Definitely do it, because this is a fast on this one. So you got to listen in. So get right close to that mic, Harry, and we'll be listening intently.
All right, this is Paper People, and I hope you like it. I like people. I'd like some paper people. They'd be purple paper people, maybe pop-up purple paper people, proper pop-up purple paper people. How do you prop up proper pop-up purple paper people? I hear you cry. Well, I probably prop up proper pop-up purple paper people with a proper pop-up purple people paper clip. But I'd pre-prepare appropriate adhesives as alternatives, a cheeky pack of Blue Tack just in case the paper slipped, because I could build a pop-up metropolis. But I wouldn't want to deal with all those paper people politics, paper politicians with their paper-thin policies, broken promises without appropriate apology. There'd be a little paper me and a little paper you. And we could watch paper TV and it would all be pay-per-view. We'd see those poppy paper rappers rap about the paper package or watch paper people carriers get stuck in paper traffic on the A4. There'd be a paper Princess Kate, but we'd all stare at paper Pippa. And we'd all live in fear of Killer Jack the Paper Ripper, because the paper propaganda propagates to people's prejudices. Papers printing pictures, those photogenic terrorists. A little paper me and a little paper you. And in a pop-up population, people's problems pop up too. There'd be that pompous paper parliament who remained out of touch and who ignored the people's protests about all those paper cuts. And then those peaceful paper protests would get blown to paper pieces by those confetti cannons manned by primitive police. And yes, there'd still be paper money. So there'd still be paper greed and those paper beaky bankers pocketing more than they need, purchasing the potpourri to pepper their paper properties. Others live in poverty and aren't acknowledged properly, a proper poor economy with so many are proper poor, but while those needs get ignored, the money goes to big wars. Origami armies unfold plans for paper planes and we remain imprisoned by our own paper chains, but the greatest shame is that it always seems to stay the same. What changes is who's in power, choosing how to lay the blame. They're naming names, forgetting these are names of people. Because in the end, it all comes down to people. I like people. Because even when the situation's dire, it is only ever people who were able to inspire, and on paper, it's hard to see how we all cope. But in the bottom of Pandora's box, there's still hope, and I still hope because I believe in people. People like my grandparents, who every single day since it was born have taken time out of their morning to pray for me. That's 8,396 days straight of someone checking I'm okay, and that's amazing. People like my aunt who Basson plays with prisoners. People who are capable of genuine forgiveness. People like the persecuted Palestinians, people who go out of their way to make your life better and expect nothing in return. You see, people have potential to be powerful. Just because the people in power tend to pretend to be victims, you need to succumb to that system. And a paper population is no different. So there's a little paper me and a little paper you. And we could watch paper TV and it would all be pay-per-view. And in a pop-up population, people's problems pop up too. But if the whole world fell apart, then we'd still make it through. Because we're people.
Amazing, Harry. Amazing. Love that. Look, do you know what I love about that? The reference to your grandparents and your aunt?
Okay, yeah.
Because it touches, it's quite touching with family, I guess.
Yeah. I did, I remember the first time I performed it. It was at Christmas and it was like very casual setting. It was like, oh, Harry, have you got any new poems? And this is like around kind of family.
Oh, it's around the dinner table.
And I did it and like, I think I just like caught my mum's eye at a certain moment and I just like couldn't do it. I ended up kind of breaking down type thing.
Right.
So, I mean, I've done it enough now that I'm not channeling that angst and energy every time. But yeah, and again, I guess I kind of said a bit before, that poem started just from playing with the sounds and the language and that, and then it kind of developed into a more storytelling thing, where I could put those kind of personal bits in it. So I think,
Sure. I think playing with sounds is an interesting one because I've seen a couple of bits and bobs of you and Chris, and you've been doing bees, and you mentioned there about dinosaur noises and
yeah, that's, I mean, that they are the ones that go best in schools with kids.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
was never a kind of specific tactic, but I think, yeah, there's a definite playfulness to it. Um, I mean, I first started writing because I loved it, because it was a very joyful experience. I mean, I think now it's so intrinsic to the way I look at the world and kind of live my life, that if, now if there's times of I guess stress or sadness or other things, I write as well to channel myself through that.
sure.
It's just a lot of those poems don't make it onto a stage because I don't think they need to.
Yeah, yeah. Just sitting in your notebook in the back pocket,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So it went from writing because I want to writing because it felt like a part of who I was. And so I love that I've discovered this at the stage I have, because I guess a lot of the poems in the book were written between the ages of 17 and 22. So there's a natural underlying theme of coming of age, of growing up, of being confident
Yeah.
in who you are, trying to fit in, feeling accepted. And yeah, I think when I first started, especially, the poets that inspired me had quite powerful personal stories, and I felt like I
Mm,
couldn't not match them on that level, but I was quite happy with my life, and I didn't want to do too much of an angsty thing on stage when I felt like I didn't have a lot to complain about. So I would put parts of myself in poems, but create these worlds, whether it was with the prime numbers or with the paper people, or the book's called The Sunshine Kid. That's another poem I have, where through focusing, I guess, on the imagery and other things, it felt more natural to then drop parts of what I was going through in it, but in a way that someone who didn't know me at all could still get something different from it. And it was only through, I guess, through writing more, performing more, traveling, you know, being halfway across the road and seeing a room full of people I don't know, and being given a space to share my thoughts, feelings, poems. I have naturally become more confident through that, and so now I've got poems that are very much written in the first person, without that added, level of metaphor or imagery to hide behind. But I still love having a mixture of both. I love the storytelling side of it, but also it's, I don't know, it's so entwined in who I am now that I know, if people see me perform, they kind of feel like they know me a bit afterwards. I know there's some
sure.
conversations afterwards, and
Yeah.
it's not like I'm acting on stage at all. It's just a slightly heightened version of who I am, and I've got to practice it loads beforehand, so it all rhymes. Um, but yeah, so I've really loved that kind of becoming a part of who I am as well.
It's going to be pretty intriguing going forward, Harry. As you grow and you grow with experience and families and this kind of thing, your poems will change and it'll
Yeah,
develop and
definitely.
it'll evolve. Excellent. So, where can we find you, Harry? If everybody wants to listen to this, wants to know a bit more about you.
Absolutely. So Harry Baker is my name. On Instagram and Twitter, it's Harry Baker Poet. On Facebook, it's Harry Baker Poetry. But in general, I've climbed up the ranks of Harry Bakers. So if you just search my name on Google, it should come up. It wasn't always the case. There's someone called Harry
Really?
Baker who invented the chiffon cake. I'm not sure what
Ah.
that is, but
Has he got harrybaker.com and you couldn't get that?
so somebody at some point got harrybaker.co.uk, and the issue I have with them is that they also write poems.
No.
And but the worst thing is there's no pictures on their website. So for
Right.
someone who just knows there's a Harry Baker does poetry, if they looked it up, they might believe it's me. I mean, none of the poems are mine. They're a bit different. But I once did a gig where they'd copied the bio from this website and used it.
He's not 63.
Exactly. So I've managed to like trump them. So yeah, Harry Baker. And then the music stuff I'm doing. It's with my friend Chris, and on any kind of social thing, it's Harry Chris. So Harry N and then Chris, just because there's all sorts of combinations of people called Harry and Chris.
I can well imagine. But what we'll do is we'll link up in the show notes to all of that.
Okay, thank you very much. But yeah, I've got videos on YouTube if you want to watch it, or yeah, if you want to read stuff, I have got my book, which is available on my website, and that's called The Sunshine Kid. And yeah, we spoke before. We can do a competition side of it. I'm happy to give away a free signed copy to someone.
Brilliant. We'll do that through Twitter, Harry.
Wicked.
So I'll push a tweet out, and if anybody wants to win Harry's book, check out industry_angel on Twitter, and we'll run a little competition, and you'll sign it for them, Harry, won't you?
Absolutely.
And give them a little.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Good stuff. Well, Harry, thanks for your time. I know we've been trying to hook up for a while because you're never here. You're here, there, and everywhere, gallivanting around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for persisting.
I told you, favorite TEDx speaker of all time, man.
It means a lot. It means a lot.
Good stuff. Well, thanks again, Harry, and enjoy Edinburgh.
I will do. Yeah. Brilliant. Cheers.
So thanks to Harry there. I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys did too. Let me know your feedback. As always, industryangel.com. You can grab me there. Excellent that Harry's going to do a competition. So, as I say, go on to Twitter, industry_angel, and there'll be a tweet there which you can retweet and like and that kind of thing with a chance to be in for the book. So until next time, I'm Ian Farrer. This is the Industry Angel, and thanks for listening.